Good afternoon. The UK has joined the United States and France in carrying out airstrikes against suspected chemical weapon sites in Syria. President Trump said it was in response to a chemical attack on civilians in Douma last week and described it as the use of righteous power against barbarism and brutality. Russia's President Putin described the attacks as an act of aggression. Here's our World Affairs correspondent Paul Adams.
After a week of talking, an hour of bombing. From a French ship in the Mediterranean, a salvo of cruise missiles, 12 in all. Britain acting too, tornadoes taking off from their base in Cyprus, also loaded with missiles. A carefully coordinated operation led by the United States.
A short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
In the early hours of the morning, explosions close to the Syrian capital, Damascus. The target, one of 3 hit by America and her allies.
It is not about intervening in a civil war. It is not about regime change. It is about a limited and targeted strike that does not further escalate tensions in the region and that does everything possible to prevent civilian casualties. And while this action is specifically about deterring the Syrian regime, it will also send a clear signal to anyone else who believes they can use chemical weapons with impunity.
Syria claims to have shot down more than a dozen missiles, but the attack involved over 100. Pictures of the aftermath on Syrian television, the research centre near Damascus reduced to rubble, and near Homs, evidence of strikes on 2 other chemical weapons targets. Syrian officials are defiant. Syria says it's business as usual. Pictures released appearing to show President Assad strolling to work. The president's supporters are celebrating what they call a victory over aggression. Last night's attacks were almost certainly less widespread than they expected. It seems clear that for now, the bombing is over. France says it won't hesitate to act again, but like its allies, it says it's not out to provoke. Russia has condemned last night's operation and is calling for a meeting of the UN Security Council. But for all its threats beforehand, it has yet to respond militarily. Syrian forces at the scene of last weekend's alleged attack. Weapons inspectors say they still expect to reach Douma today. Syria and Russia continue to insist that nothing happened there. Paul Adams, BBC News.
Our correspondent Martin Patience is in Beirut. He says the Syrian regime is suggesting the strikes won't change anything.
Well, Syria's leader is keen to project an image as business as usual. We have that extraordinary video when he apparently turned up in the presidential palace for work in what has been dubbed as a morning of resistance. We've heard from the Syrian government. They have claimed that this military action was illegal. They also claim to have shot down most of the missiles, a claim that we can independently verify. But the Syrian president also stressed that this attack had strengthened his resolve to crush, as he put it, terrorism in every inch of the country. And what that means is the fighting in Syria will continue and the Western airstrikes will not change that.
Our political correspondent Vicky Young has been looking at reaction in the UK.
Getting the preparations right. British pilots ready themselves for action, heading into danger on the front line, following orders from politicians back home. Under pressure to explain why she ordered airstrikes, Theresa May told journalists in Downing Street this was a limited use of force and there was no alternative path. And Mrs May drew a clear link with the Salisbury nerve agent attack for which she holds Russia responsible.
So while this action is specifically about deterring the Syrian regime, it will also send a clear signal to anyone else who believes they can use chemical weapons with impunity.
Jeremy Corbyn says the Prime Minister was wrong not to consult Parliament before the airstrikes, which he suggests are illegal.
She could have come to Parliament on Monday to discuss the whole situation. Instead, they've launched these strikes. She claims there is a legal basis for it. I've asked her in a letter I've just sent to her this morning to publish in full the legal basis and justification for it.
When Cabinet Ministers met on Thursday to discuss taking action against the Syrian regime, they were given legal advice, and the government is expected to publish a summary of that later. Opposition parties have other questions for Theresa May.
It doesn't do anything to bring Syria to a more peaceful resolution, and I'm not convinced it actually seeks to do what it achieves, which is to undermine the Syrian government's ability to deploy chemical weapons in the future. So there are big issues to explore here. The public expects Parliament to do its job in holding the government accountable.
We understand it's a weighted decision, it's difficult, and there are legitimate reasons for wanting to respond to the use of chemical weapons, which undoubtedly has occurred. But there are major questions, major doubts. Is this a one-off or is it a continuing operation? How much control do we have over what the Americans are doing? We've got a very erratic American president who changes his position from one day to the next.
Theresa May will have to answer all these questions on Monday when MPs return to Westminster. She's adamant, though, that military action was the right thing to do. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Briefly now in sport, Scotland have won another 2 medals at the Commonwealth Games, bringing the total medal tally to 43. Jack Weitzman took bronze in the 1500 metres track, while Kirsty Gilmore also won bronze in the badminton. Tomorrow is the last day of the Games. Football and Motherwell are through to the Scottish Cup final. They beat Aberdeen 3-0 at Hampden Park. Motherwell have waited 27 years to get their hands back on the Scottish Cup trophy, and they'll take on the winners of tomorrow's game between Rangers and Celtic. Let's get the weather now with Gillian. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Laura. A decent afternoon across the UK, although as you can see on the satellite image, the best of the sunshine is across England and Wales. North of the border, a fair bit of cloud, but still some decent breaks, and it will be predominantly dry. Just 1 or 2 showers, most likely across the southwest. The Northern Isles, cloudier conditions with some outbreaks of patchy rain for Shetland, but most places will be dry. We've lost the nagging easterly breeze, picked up a much milder southerly, and temperatures widely getting into the mid-teens. So tonight most places will be dry, though still some patchy rain for Shetland, and increasingly towards the end of the night we'll see a few showers getting into the west coast on a freshening southerly breeze. Not a terribly cold night, and as we head into tomorrow we start the day with a lot of sunshine, but as the day goes on, thickening cloud and strengthening winds bringing some showers in from the west. Further south across the UK, a mixture of scattered blustery showers and sunny spells tomorrow. It'll be northern Scotland hanging on to the best of the dry and bright weather, and still a relatively mild feel. That's the forecast. Laura.
And that's all from us for now. Gillian and I will be back with more news, sport and weather in Reporting Scotland at 10 to 7 this evening. We hope you can join us then. Until then, have a great afternoon. Bye-bye for now.